Here at Dan's Fish, we have about 500 aquariums, and today I'm going to show you the fish in one of the most unique aquariums we have in the entire fish warehouse. So this is an aquarium that I've been wanting to do for a long time. This is an all albino aquarium, and we're going to get into each species of fish and their care and a little bit about them. But first I want to talk about the tank in general. This is a 40-gallon breeder. It's a simple setup. There's just some sand there. It's the fine silica sand from Ace Hardware. It comes out nice and clean. You can put this right in your tank, and within a few minutes it'll be nice and clear. It doesn't have all the dust in it that your playground sand would have. It has a simple box filter back there, somewhat hidden by a piece of wood, some driftwood, and some Java moss. That's about it. So very simple setup here. The reason albino fish work so well is fish have multiple pigments. So in humans, we just have one pigment, right? We have melanin. And if we lose our melanin, then we're just pure bright white. With fish, they can lose their melanin and keep their other pigments. So you can get a pure white fish, you can get an orange fish, the reds, the oranges, the yellows still come through. And in addition to all of that, the iridophores, the things, the cells that make the fish iridescent, those are still active in albino fish. So just because they're albino doesn't mean you're just gonna get, one pink or white kind of fish. They're not like mammals. You'll get a smorgasbord of colors that were formerly masked quite a bit by the melanin. So you get these bright colors that are unmasked basically by the loss of the melanin. So an albino tank can have a lot of variety in it, a lot of color, a lot of brightness that you wouldn't normally see in your fish. So let's go over them species by species. What we have in here are some albino redhead Tapajos. We also have some albino Hoplo Catfish, a strain of really fancy Sailfin albino lyre-tail mollies, and we also have some albino Bushynose, which will come out from time to time. They tend to hang out in the wood. So let's go over these species. Let's start with the albino redhead Tapajos. So the scientific name is Geophagus pyrocephalus. I think that's a great name. It means firehead. And the reason they're called that is because they have a really distinct bright red, orange, or red head. It's absolutely a stunning fish. These come from the Rio Tapajos, the lower Rio Tapajos. It's a tributary of the Amazon. They've been around for a while. They were first collected in 1991, but they were not scientifically described until 2021, and the description wasn't approved by science until 2022. So it took a while to figure out what they were. I would describe them as a medium-sized cichlid. If you look on the internet, you'll see all kinds of size ranges for them, on up to like 9 inches or so. So I don't know what to believe. I've only seen them get about 4 inches or so. The original scientific description said that they get 4 to 5 inches standard length. Now, standard length does not include the tail, so that's just the body size, from the tip of the nose to the end of the peduncle, right before the tail fin starts. So that was the biggest they found in nature when they did the study to scientifically describe the fish, but maybe they get bigger in aquariums with all the food and care we give them. I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly how big they get, but maybe around the size of like a Geophagus weinmilleri or something like that. In the wild, they're very widespread. This is not an endangered species. They're all around. In fact, the native populations eat them. You can find them at the fish market being sold for food. So very common fish in the Rio Tapajos. Where they live in the Rio Tapajos is on the sandbars. So if there's a bend in the river and you get the sand washing up and you get that sandy beach area, that's what they inhabit. And they're called Geophagus for a reason. Geo, earth, phagus, eat. They're called earth eaters because what they do is they go around and they sift through the sand. They'll suck up mouthfuls of the sand and sort out little nuggets of food from that and then expel it out their gills. So they're constantly pulling sand in their mouth, finding little morsels in it and spitting the rest out of their gills. That's awesome because what that means is they keep your sand turned over in your aquarium. They're constantly working your substrate. Also, these come from white water. They aren't from the black, super soft, acidic, tannic water that a lot of the fish from Brazil come from. these are whitewater. It's fairly neutral pH. There's minerals in the water, so they tend to do really well in the hard alkaline water that most of us have naturally coming out of our taps here in the United States. So a great fit, easy to acclimate to your aquariums. So we've seen in this video, we've seen the albinos. What does the wild fish look like? Well, it looks like this. Still an absolutely beautiful fish. And then you take away the melanin and you get this, the albino. So they're both awesome. I like both of them a lot. The albino strain's hard to get. It hasn't been around very often. I've only been able to bring it in, I think, twice. So still not widespread. Besides just an all albino tank, I think it'd be really cool to take, just have a Geophagus tank with just this species and have like several that are albinos and several that are wild forms. I think that would be a spectacular looking tank as well. So a lot you can do with this species. Now, one question I know I'm going to get is, what food is that they're eating? It's this, it's the Extreme Monster Pellet. Now, I don't want to give the impression that we only feed extreme foods. I really like the Aquarium Co-op foods. We feed the Hikari Vibrobites. We feed the Zoomed Spirulina Flakes and a wide variety of frozen foods. But the reason I use the Extreme Monster Pellet when I make videos is it's a large pellet, so I can kind of control where the fish gather because they'll all go to that pellet, and it's water stable so it doesn't cloud up the water. If I was to feed like the Aquarium Co-op's Magic Small Fish Feed, which I love and I find very useful, but if I fed that on video, it would float in the water column and make the video less clear. So this is the food that we're using right now in this video. It's not the only food we feed though. And by the way, I'm not sponsored by Extreme to talk about it, and I don't get a kickback from the Aquarium Co-op or anything when I talk about these things. I really like what the co-op's doing, and I want to support them. And I think their food's awesome, and I think Extreme does a good job with their food too. So when I use something, I'll tell you about it. Anyway, just wanted to get that out of the way. Let's get back to the fish. One of the other fish we have in here is the albino Hoplo Catfish. It's Hoplosternum throracatum. So this is a heavily armored catfish. Hoplosternum refers to like the Hoplo military units back in Greece that were heavily armored, and then sternum is, you know, the sternum. So it's armored sternum is what their name means, and that's a good name because these guys have thick, heavy armor on them. But despite that, they're peaceful. So what's really neat about the Hoplo catfish is it's gentle enough for a community aquarium. They're not going to mess with fish that they can't easily eat. Anything that's big enough for them to not swallow, they're going to leave alone. But they're also tough enough that you can keep them with fairly aggressive fish. For example, these would be fine with appropriately sized Central American cichlids. So gentle enough for a peaceful community, tough enough for a tough community. They can get along in any neighborhood pretty much. They grow to about 6 inches, so for a catfish, they're fairly small. That's a manageable size. And something I love about them is they are not shy. If you notice, they're not hanging out, hiding under the wood like the albino Bushynose Plecos. They're out and about. You'll see them all day long. So they're a catfish that doesn't hide all the time, which is awesome. So you can actually enjoy them frequently. So the habitat for these fish is fairly stale, stagnant, still water. And one of the ways they deal with that is they can breathe air. It's more like they eat air. They don't have lungs or anything, but what they do is they'll dart to the surface, they'll gulp some air, and they'll swallow it like they swallow their food. And then their intestines act as a lung. Their intestines are highly vasculated. So when they eat food, all the nutrients from the food goes and hits the intestines, and all the blood cells surrounding the intestine can absorb the nutrients, right? Well, they do that with air as well. They'll swallow air, and all the blood vessels around the intestine will absorb the air out of their intestine and oxygenate their blood. So you'll see them doing that because even in highly oxygenated water, they still go up and gulp. It's a habit. It's an itch that they have to scratch. But that is an adaptation to living in stagnant, really oxygen poor water. And another adaptation for that environment is how they spawn. Believe it or not, these build a bubble nest like a betta or a gourami. And they do it for the same reasons that bettas and gouramis do. Because you have this oxygen poor environment, but in order for the eggs to develop, they need high oxygen, right? They need a lot of energy. It takes a lot for an egg to develop and for a fry to grow. So these Hoplo catfish will build a bubble nest at the surface. Often they'll have a bunch of plants in it to kind of help keep its structure. They'll lay their eggs, the eggs go up into those bubbles, and in those bubbles, they're exposed to lots of oxygen. So the water right below them won't be well oxygenated, but the bubble nest itself will be. So that's how they've adapted to that kind of environment. They can breathe air, and they spawn in such a way that their babies can still develop even though the water itself is low in oxygen. Kind of cool. These are very, very common in their natural habitat. They're a food fish. You go to any fish market down there and they will have them available. Now, when it comes to sheer beauty, perhaps the most spectacular fish in this aquarium are those fancy albino golden sailfin mollies. I mean, just look at these spectacular fish. It's hard not to have your eye drawn to them when those males swim around and spread their big sail fins and display and look so darned gorgeous. Now, the normal golden sailfin molly is nothing to sneeze at. That's also a nice fish. Those look like this. They have a pleasant sailfin, which they display all the time. They're a nice golden color. But when you compare that with this fancy albino golden sailfin molly strain, you'll see the work that the breeder has put in to make these extra special. That dorsal fin is extra big. It's just a nice, big, oversized dorsal fin on the fully mature males. Now, I know there's one male in here that has a split in his dorsal fin because he's recovering from an old injury, but you know, injuries happen sometimes. But genetically, these have an amazing dorsal fin. The color on them is spectacular. I like the mix of the white platinum gold with some yellow gold highlights, and then some of the other fish which have the more yellow gold base with a few white platinum gold highlights. It just, having a group together with that kind of mix adds a nice color variation to the tank, but they all get along because they're all based on a theme. And I think that's gorgeous. And then they have this nice lyre tail or leer tail. I've heard, everyone tells me different ways to say it. I don't know which one it is, but however you say that instrument that Pan used to play back in mythology, it's that tail. That's what it's named for. What I like about these fish, what I think they do for this aquarium, is they add a different cadence, a different rhythm to this tank. So the hoplos are kind of slowly cruising around, looking for food. They're beautiful, they're neat looking fish, but that's their cadence. The albino redhead Tapajos Geophagus are sifting the sand, so that's kind of the cadence. So that's, in both those species stay on the bottom of the aquarium. And then you get these big fancy albino golden sailfin mollies in here, and they add a lot of action to the aquarium. Even when it's not feeding time, they'll constantly be displaying to each other. They're constantly sparring, they're constantly breeding, and just adding a lot of life. And they don't stay down at the bottom of the aquarium. They swim mid-water and upper water and kind of fill that area. So that's what I think they add to this aquarium. They fill a different zone, and they add a different rhythm, which complements what's going on down on the bottom with the cichlids and the catfish. Now, something to be aware of with mollies is they need some veggies in their diet. It's important to rotate veggies into the dietary plan for any molly. And the reason is, in nature, they eat a lot of algae and they eat a lot of biofilm and stuff. But there's large parts of the year where they rely heavily on detritus. So what is detritus? Well, it's decaying plant matter that still has a lot of caloric value in it. So it's not a nice meal. It's not a 5-star delicious meal you would go to on your anniversary, but it does have nutritional value. What it is, it's like when you go to your pantry and open the cupboard door and all you have left in the house, the only food left is like that last can of tuna fish back in the corner. It's like, it's not great, but it's gonna get me through this meal, right? It has nutrition in it. That's kind of what detritus is for these fish. When there aren't other things to eat, they'll go for the detritus and it sustains them. Anyway, because they eat algae and biofilm and quite a lot of detritus, they eat a lot of plant matter in nature, and so we need to give them some of that in the aquarium. Another fish in this tank which also needs a lot of algae and vegetable matter in its diet is the albino Bushynose Pleco, the last species in this aquarium that we need to talk about. What's amazing about Bushynose Plecos is they stay a manageable size. For decades and decades, the common Pleco was sold by pet stores to unsuspecting fish buyers as a cleanup crew or algae eater for their aquarium, right? So you get your 10-gallon aquarium or your 20-gallon aquarium, And often you would end up going home with a common Pleco, not knowing that that sucker is going to get massive. It's a tank buster. It's going to get so big, it's going to take over your house. I mean, not quite, but it's definitely going to outgrow most aquariums that the average fish keeper has. Luckily now we have Bushynose Plecos. They stay a manageable size and they do a great job eating algae that cover surfaces, algae that would be on the front glass or rocks or wood. Those soft kind of diatom algae, soft green algae. They're not very good on hair algae or blackbeard algae, stuff that kind of has tufts and grows up into the water column. But if it just coats the surface, they're pretty good about eating it. The other thing that's cool about this fish is its face. I mean, they're called Bushynose Plecos for a reason. They have like full bush on the face, and the older they get, the more pronounced it grows. These are nocturnal catfish. During the day, they tend to hide out. They'll go swim under that wood in this tank and hang out there during the daytime. If they were the normal, natural color, it's kind of a brown color, they're dark and they would disappear in there and you wouldn't see them very often. But the albinos are this kind of bright yellow gold color. And so even when they're hanging out in the wood, you'll often see them. So you'll see them a lot more than the natural brown color. And that's why I like the albino Bushynose Pleco. And that's why I think it's such a great addition to an aquarium like this. So there you go. If you want a unique aquarium that will definitely get people talking, you could do worse than trying something that has all albino varieties of fish in it. It's sure to get people's attention. If you want to know more about aquarium fish, we do a live stream every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time at the Dancefish YouTube channel. I'd love to see you there. Come join us. And if you saw anything you liked, all our fish are available at dancefish.com. Thanks, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.